Welcome everybody to another episode of Misfit History. Okay, welcome to another episode of Misfit History. I'm one of your co-hosts, joined as always by another one of your co-hosts, and by our special guest and always producer, who is also celebrating his birthday on the day we're recording this, or actually the day before. So happy birthday.
Thank you.
He does a great job getting the audio and video and editing and posting and does all the hard work. So today we're talking about an episode. On this episode, we're talking about someone who I'm very excited to discuss. He was a multi-war veteran. He was an explorer and a businessman and had all sorts of adventures. He traveled the world. He flew planes, and he was addicted to adrenaline like maybe no one else in history has ever been. And I'm especially excited because neither of them know who we're talking about yet. So they're going to be finding out about our person for the first time. And our person is Wing Commander Lionel Sauce Frederick William Cohen. Very well-known name. If you look up Lionel Cohen, you will first find a musician. If you look up Lionel Cohen historical figure, you'll find a barrister and magistrate. It'll take a little bit of digging to find the Lionel Cohen we're referring to, but he has a pretty crazy story. Have either of you guys seen Forrest Gump?
I don't think I have, actually.
I've seen like bits and pieces, but
I've
not the
never
whole
actually
thing.
watched the whole movie.
One of the greatest movies of all time. Most people listening or watching this have probably seen Forrest Gump. And if this video gets 50 likes, we'll have to do like a live watch reaction of you guys because it's a historical movie. It's just not at all based off a real person. And for those who haven't seen Forrest Gump, it's the story of I don't want to, no spoilers, you know, it is only like 30 years old. But basically a guy who is good at everything he does. He plays football, and then he goes to Vietnam, and then he has a shrimping boat and makes, you know, a lot of money that way, and invests and runs across the country and becomes a world champion table tennis player and has all sorts of things that he just does. He just never stops doing things, and it's like he has 100 lives. And this guy might have been somewhat of an influence on the character of Forrest Gump because his nickname was the man with 100 lives. And I'm very excited for this, if you can't tell. So anyway, Lionel was born in June 7th, 1875. And he very early on got the nickname Sausage, which was shortened to Sauce. So he was born in Newcastle on Tyne, in a place called Tankerville House, which was a walled-in house. And so his family was very, very wealthy. His father, Andrew Meyer Cohen, was
a walled-in house, like
they had a wall,
like
they had walls around it. It's semi-important describing his youth because basically his family was super rich and their house was kind of shuttered off from the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. And he was a very free-ranging spirit, but his family would be like, don't, like, just wander, like, you're one of the rich people in this area. So like he would sneak out, get the help of servants to getting out of the house at night and wander the streets. And this is, you know, 1880s in England, which is not a great time. No, I mean, the 1880s anywhere was not very great. So his dad, Andrew Cohen, was a British citizen who was naturalized British citizen who was born in Hamburg, Germany, who married Augusta Cohen, and that was her name before marriage, which made researching them a little complicated. And she was born in Prussian Poland. So Andrew, his dad, had a partnership with his brother-in-law, Joseph Cohen, who would, and again, the names are so absurd. It's so hard to keep track of who's who. So just don't even worry about these guys' names.
Do you think that maybe they were like related?
I mean,
Or
Hamburg and Prussia, like Germany and Prussia, pretty close. Because I mean, Hamburg, Germany wasn't really Germany yet
Yeah.
either. But at the same time, the world was so big back then compared to now, where like it's hard to see a family like having roots all over unless their history had another person like Lionel in it, because he had roots.
But they
go
were
everywhere.
also wealthy too.
They were wealthy, but they built up their wealth. Through he partnered with his brother-in-law, and they built up a steamship company. And so they would they were shipping.
So it wasn't really much of like generations of wealth.
It wasn't
more...
generations of wealth.
Okay.
No. They did have a nice start though, but it was they got really rich through their shipping out of Newcastle. So Newcastle on Tyne, where they were at, had ports obviously.
Yeah.
And the family, he had 6 brothers and 5, or he was one of 6 brothers and 5 sisters he also had. And they all went to the same school, Singleton House Primary School. And they lived in Jesmond, which was the most expensive area of Newcastle. So Lionel would always talk to the servants. He always had a good time chatting up with them. He talked about in an interview about that he did for his memoir, he would mention about how they were always more interesting, and he would get in trouble because he would be dressed like them or be playing with the servant kids or sit in the kitchen and talk to the cook.
Yeah.
Well, his family was like, that's not proper. Don't do that. And he would sneak out and go to the docks and talk to people there. Even when he was really, really young, and he'd get in trouble, he'd follow his uncle around, the other one who was involved in this steamship company, who would go to the docks because he worked down there. And his uncle would get involved with unsavory characters, including one night, a late night interaction with a prostitute that he was following his uncle and saw his uncle, who was, again, from the wealthiest neighborhood in this area, talking to a prostitute who he apparently knew well. And then his uncle realized that his nephew had seen him and was like, if you tell anyone about this, I'm going to strangle you myself. And so he said he didn't tell anyone until his uncle died. So but in 1889, so he was only 14 at the time, his father died in North Yorkshire. I can't say any words. And so the widow and the 11 kids moved to Highbury in North London. So while he wandered to the docks often, he met the explorer H.M. Stanley. He probably saw H.M. Stanley's boat and then later said, I met him.
Yeah.
But one person he did talk to was an unnamed young African cabin boy. And the cabin boy would talk about his time on the sea and talk about continental Africa and how vast it was, the animals on it, the gold and silver mines, and tell him stories about, elephants, lions. Yeah. And so Lionel wanted to see some lions. And it got into his head that he should go see Africa at some point. So sometime between 14 and 16, but closer to 14, he was sent to work at Lewison's General Merchants. This was in Charterhouse Square, Aldersgate. He was adventurous and restless and got very bored of this job quickly. He was just working as a clerk.
Yeah.
And without a word to his family, walking home from work one day, he decided to go into a recruiting office in Trafalgar Square and sign up for a 14-year enlistment.
14 years?
14-year enlistment in the Royal Marines Light Infantry. After lying about his age. And they said sure. And shipped him off to Deal Barracks near Dover. So he spent 3 months as a soldier in the Royal Marines when he was a teenager.
Oh, wow.
Why only 3 months?
Because after very much enjoying his life of marching, shooting muskets, fighting with bayonets, and boxing grown adults, the police found him, and his mother and his Uncle Joe, the one who had threatened to strangle him earlier, arrived and bought out his contract for £20 and dragged him kicking and screaming back home.
Oh my goodness.
So they were outraged at the behavior, but they realized Lionel was not the type of kid to work a normal clerkship.
Yeah.
And so they said, where do you want to go? Like, if you could go anywhere. And he said, Africa. And they said, well, coincidentally, you have another very wealthy uncle, Harry Cohen. Don't know whether it was on his mom's side or his dad's side, this Cohen, in Johannesburg, South Africa. And so they sent him at late 16 or early 17 years old on a ship to South Africa, the Pretoria Castle. And Johannesburg was essentially the Wild West in the 1880s and 90s. It was a boom town. There were more than 500 saloons in the town, even though it only had, I think, it had less than 100,000 people when he would have arrived. There were gunfights in the streets, and it was basically the American Wild West set in South Africa, with a lot of other conflicts going on between the Dutch and the British. It was like a wilder version of the Wild West. Wow. It was crazy. And so this was certainly a good adventure to go on. And he got there very excited, sailed in, and he was like, my uncle's here. What am I going to do? And his uncle said, you're being my clerk. So he again was just a clerk. So he traveled across the world to do the same thing he did for his other uncle back home. So he walked away from this job and then decided to become a hotel waiter so he could talk to all the nice people. And after about 2 weeks as a hotel waiter, he decided to enlist as a guard on the Joburg Reef. Again, just 17 years old, and had no money because he had spent it all trying to get out to the reef. And in one of very, very early on, maybe even his first week, he fell asleep on duty and they arrested him for negligence and put him in jail. And his uncle had to come and pay his bail to get him out. The uncle whose job he had left. And so his uncle comes into the jail, is like, are we all done? And Lionel was like, or I'll just call him Sauce from now on because that was his nickname. Sauce was like, yep, it's all good. Just pay my way out. His uncle paid his way out. They walked out onto the street. His uncle started walking, and Lionel turned around and walked the other way.
Oh my.
So he heard that so around this time there was a conflict going on. I'll explain more, but essentially the brewing up of the conflict had been going on for some time. And so he heard that the British South Africa Company, and around this time, companies were basically governing entities. Yeah. The most famous one was the East India Company, which had the second largest naval fleet in the world. And the first was the British Navy. Yeah, so these companies were extremely wealthy, had their own armies, and essentially operated as auxiliary units of the British military. And so the British South Africa Company...
How did they... Just side note. How did they... Like, why? What was the point of having the military for a company?
So it wasn't technically that the military was... like that the company had their own military, it wasn't a military for the company. That's a good question. It was more that these companies were independent entities that were so wealthy they raised their own private army.
Yeah, but like, what's the point?
They went to war. These companies did.
With each other?
Not with each other that much. The big one they would go to war with was whatever population was in the area they were trading in.
Oh.
So anyone interfering with their trade routes, war. They pirates, war. They'd take out fleets of pirates.
Okay.
People who wanted to keep their land, the companies would roll them over and go to war. They were very rarely ethically nice. Yeah. They were pretty horrible usually. Gosh. It was but the British South Africa Company was one of the really bad ones. Probably not as bad as the East India Company because it just didn't make as much money. Mm-hmm. It was it went to war quite a bit though. It had a lot of different wars. And they were prepping for an invasion. This company was. So he applied, but they turned him down because they said he was too young and he didn't know how to ride a horse. So he decided that if they wouldn't take him at this application station, he'd just go to another one and apply there.
Oh.
So his uncle realized that he wasn't going to be able to convince Sauce to stay.
Yeah.
So he gave him a sovereign and said, good luck.
What's a sock? Oh,
Just a coin, yeah.
what's
so
the point of it?
He just gave him some money to,
Oh, okay.
yeah, just get some money. You can go. Good luck.
Yeah.
I don't want you going out there with nothing. Because again, he was broke and stuck in jail before
Yeah.
this. And his uncle had just bailed him out. And then Sauce was like, I'm going to go join the army. And his uncle was like, they're not going to accept you. His uncle was right. They didn't accept him. And then Sauce was like, I'm just going to go ask somewhere else if they
Yeah.
want me to join. And his uncle was like, if there's no talking you out of it, at least take something for the road.
Yeah.
So he walked for days and days. A barmaid tricked him and stole his sovereign on the first day. So he had to walk without any money for the rest of the trip. So he decided to get a job as a waiter. And then on his second day as a waiter, he got fired again.
Bro.
So he went to a lead and silver mine. Worked there for a couple of days. Got into trouble for that. And decided to join a column going north. Got a job as a transport driver on his way to Fort Victoria. And then as soon as he arrived in Fort Victoria, they saw him as a transport driver and thought, this guy must have tons of riding experience. And so he was taken without any trouble straight into the Victoria column he was trying to sign up for before at this new station and set forth in September of 1893 for the invasion of Matabele Land. That is the name. These are really tough names. So the invasion of Matabele Land refers to the first Matabele War. Matabele War? I don't know how to say that. Which was a conflict between the British South Africa Company, led by Cecil Rhodes, where they invaded and dismantled the Matabele Kingdom in modern-day Zimbabwe, which is why one of the sources for this was the history of Zimbabwe thing,
Yeah.
is why he popped up. So King Lobengula of the Matabele granted mineral rights to the company, which Cecil Rhodes, the leader of the British South Africa Company, used as a legal foothold to occupy the region.
Yeah.
And then Rhodes and his captain of his army, or chief of his army, Leander Starr Jameson, sought a reason to try to seize the land from the king to control its gold reserves and farmland for the country. This kind of is why what you were asking about, is they wanted to. The army was there so that way they could sign contracts and then forcibly take over land. So King Lobengula sent a raiding party to punish a chief of another tribe near Fort Victoria. Mm-hmm. That chief had stolen cattle from the king. Mm-hmm. But the British South Africa Company used it to say that they were trying to attack the white settlers in the area and declare war. So, and a crazy thing that Lionel got to see during this war was the first time the Maxim machine gun ever got used. Was in this war, which is crazy because it was like the gun for the next several years. So yeah, in the biggest, I guess, defeat was in the Battle of the Shangani, which was when a British South African Company army of 700 men repelled between 5,000 and 6,000 of the Matabele Kingdom warriors. This is a quote: "The Maxims mowed them down like grass," resulting in roughly 1,500 Matabele deaths versus only 4 British.
Only 4?
Only 4. And Sauce was at this battle of the Shangani River, and he had a new friend, Walters, who was a Jew from Manchester, he got fatally wounded. He was one of the 4 who died. And he died in Sauce's arms, who was only 17 or 18. And because Sauce was technically Jewish from his mother's side, from Prussian Poland, the chaplain told him he had to do the burial ceremony. So he made an 18-year-old bury and try to tearfully go through whatever he could remember of the ceremony. Also, the Battle of Bimbesi. I can't say these names, but you can look them up, spell them phonetically how I'm saying them if you want to find out how to pronounce them better. The Battle of Bimbesi was the next battle that he fought in only 6 days after this. Sauce fought in again, and this was another crushing defeat for the Matabele, where they lost about 2,500 men this time to Maxim machine guns. So, and this was his first experience using the bayonet when he fought hand to hand in the bushes. So he was only 18 and had already traveled in the 1800s across the world, walked across South Africa, worked in a silver mine, had his money stolen by a barmaid. Like, he had a crazy life, and he was only 18. He'd buried a friend and delivered religious ceremonies for him. He'd fought with a bayonet. He was one of the first people in the world to use a Maxim machine gun. Like, genuinely one of the first people ever to use it in a fight. And then he was part of a relief column of only 25 that did the Shangani Patrol, which was the remnant of his column, going to essentially mop up anyone who was left, any stragglers in the area who tried to hold out. But he, during this bayoneting in the bush, got malaria, which is not fun. So, and the conditions were really, really bad back then. So getting malaria, he was in a hot climate with no food or medical supplies, and essentially on death's door. But the war was so decisively won that even though the first major battle was in October 2025 or 25 October 25, 1893, the war was over by December of 1893. So it was a 2-month war. And the columns that they were in, he was in one of the 2 columns, were demobilized. They got their land and mining rights back in January of 1894. And as soon as he got healthy again, Sauce decided to sell all his land rights for £50 and go back to South Africa. He went back to his uncle and worked for him as a mine manager. So he was really settling down. You know, he got his youthful streak out at 18, fighting in wars, and he worked as a mine manager for a couple of years. And after he became immediately bored with being a mine manager, left and went to Delagoa Bay in Portuguese East Africa, which is modern day Mozambique. And then he worked as a butcher, and then he became a mine recruiting agent, where he would travel around and recruit people to go work in mines. While doing this, he got bitten by a green mamba while he was asleep, almost died. In another scenario, during his time as this mining recruiter, he was traveling through modern day Mozambique, and some Portuguese officers walked up to him and started talking to him. And so he worked for Portuguese East Africa. The only problem was Lionel never learned Portuguese. And so they were talking to him, and he didn't know what they were saying. And then they pulled out guns and started pointing them at him and took him into a prison and went to hang him. And then they realized they had the wrong guy. They had mistaken him for a rebel leader who looked something like him, and he didn't know enough Portuguese to talk back, so they just thought he was giving him the silent treatment.
That's crazy.
He also had a rather dubious honor of meeting a guy named Roger Casement, who was the British consul general in what's modern day Maputo, who was later shot for treason in World War One. Roger Casement was. So he met him while he was in Africa as well. He worked in a boot shop. He worked at a jeweler's. He went to visit London again to see his family in 1897. Then went back to Johannesburg, where his uncle gave him another position with his mining job. So his uncle was very much trying to keep him like in a normal career, and he just never did it. He went north to buy cattle and tried to become a cowboy in Africa, which he did like the job, but then he had a crisis of conscience and went inland. He used to when he was a mining recruiter, this is another fun story, he would buy rot gut alcohol and give a party for anyone who would sign on to work at the mine. Just super cheap, horrible, dangerous. Essentially, it gave you a risk of going blind. And he would just feed these 16 to 20-year-olds who were signing up to work in the mines for a year. Just a crazy party on the worst alcohol he could find. And so he was working with Consolidated Goldfields and making a pretty good living. But we all know by now, he's not going to stay wherever he makes a good living. And in 1899, the Boer War began. So the Boer War was a conflict between the British Empire and the Boer Republic. It was a dispute over land, as always happened. British expansion, which was also what always happened. And the discovery of gold. The British had concentration camps in this war, which mirrors another war Lionel fought in later in life. And if you're keeping track of the dates, it is many, many years apart. They also had a scorched earth policy, similar to what happened during the Civil War, where it was just burn everything. So the British Empire fought the Afrikaner or Boer republics, and the Orange Free State was also involved in the war. There was a lot of tension between the foreign workers who came in for the gold mines, who the Boer felt like were stealing their jobs and land. So the Boers were the well-armed Dutch and African landholders in the area. They besieged the British-held towns. So it was a pretty brutal war. Like, it was a very, very violent war. So Sauce heard about this war getting going. And he decided if there was a war somewhere, he better be involved. So he went and talked to the British consul about joining them. And they were like, maybe not. And then he decided, hey, you know who has a great intelligence apparatus? The Portuguese. They almost assassinated me. So he joined Portuguese field intelligence because he wanted to get involved in the war however he could. And they made him a special forces commander who would operate behind enemy lines. So he took 100 troops and patrolled the Mozambique frontier to prevent gun smuggling to the Boers from sympathizing countries like Germany, who he wound up fighting a couple of more times in his life, and Holland. Again, the Boer were Dutch descended a lot. And he would also have to intercept their messengers and spies, the Boer messengers and spies coming from the Portuguese neutral territory. He would report to the Portuguese and pass on information to British field intelligence. So one time he was doing his job of patrolling, and he saw 2 gold miners, and he went up to talk to them, and they were very quiet, very hesitant to speak to him. And he kept talking to them and kept talking to them, and then he heard they had a bit of an accent. These prospectors is what they claimed to be. And he talked to them a little bit more, and he realized they had a German accent. And he caught 2 German spies who pretended to be prospectors trying to sneak in. Another time, he ended up killing a Boer commando who was trying to hunt down and eliminate high-profile targets. And there was a Boer general named General Byers, and he hated Sauce so much. Sauce was so important to the war effort with the Portuguese special forces that he swore he would catch Sauce, cover him in honey, and bury him in an anthill. But Sauce was never captured, of course. He was a real-life Jack Sparrow.
Yeah.
But and drinking rock gut liquor the whole time, probably. So he threw himself into the arduous work. He had some excitement with incursions by other war forces and got into some skirmishes. But eventually he returned to Johannesburg, where he joined the Rand Rifles. Now, if you remember the name Rand, that was one of the mining companies he worked with before, but now he was essentially a military unit owned by this mining company.
Yeah.
Again, companies had armies because there were random wars just breaking out until recently.
Yeah.
Like, the world was just awful. The history has never been nice. It's never been kind to the people who lived it. Every time people think you're in the worst time in history, there was another time that was definitely worse. So the mines on the Rand, he joined their standing army. So he oscillated a lot between clerk, mine worker, and soldier. And his soldiership was all over the place on who he fought with. So he settled down for the first time in Johannesburg after the Boer War. His brother Jack, who also moved, they decided to stay together and work the stock exchange. So the stock exchange was started in 1987 in Johannesburg. Mm-hmm. So by this point, it was pretty thriving, despite the wild nature of Johannesburg. And his uncle decided to kind of fund the start of their work. His Uncle Harry. The guy who's been kind of picking up the slack for him whenever he gets into too much trouble. Uncle Harry was really rich. All his family was rich. And he was just spending his money willy-nilly, getting robbed by barmaids, joining random armies. He had the coolest stories at Christmas, though. But they didn't celebrate Christmas. And in 1902... Harry bought the assets of Standard and Diggers News, which had ceased publication in 1900 because of the Boer War. And then he revived it as the Rand Daily Mail in 1903 and put both Jack and Sauce in charge of a newspaper. He realized very quickly neither of them should be in charge of a newspaper. So he gave editorial policy to a guy named Edgar Wallace, who was famous in our time as the most prolific author of detective stories. Edgar Wallace was born the same year as Sauce, but he was born very, very poor. Like Sauce, though, he did have a wandering career. He left the army for journalism in 1898 and became a war correspondent during the Boer War. He was notorious for scoops in defiance of military censorship. And this was using this newspaper. That he was writing news that the military didn't want him writing, because this newspaper was owned by Harry, who also was a stockbroker and had a mining company. And so he used the share dealings to send news cables disguised as share transactions. So the military didn't realize he was sending information about them out. And this had less to do with his journalism and more to deal with Harry was trying to game the system by getting information about what was going to happen in the war. He could make spur of the moment investments that made him a lot of money. But it worked also to make that Edgar Wallace had a successful journalism career because everyone was like, wow, this guy just knows stuff nobody else can figure out. And then Uncle Harry killed himself. Sorry,
Why?
graphic depiction of suicide content.
I was
warning.
not expecting that one.
1904, he lost all his money. So he killed himself, and now Sauce and Jack had to sell the paper to try to get enough money. They had a very, very good
How
offer.
did he lose all his money? Just
The war, the speculating stock market,
Oh.
the mines, everything went bad all at once for him.
yeah.
And a guy who does share dealing using journalism and sending out fake share reports to try to spread news that he wasn't supposed to send. Let's just say he played a risky game and it bit him. And in 1904, he killed himself. Sauce and Jack had to sell the paper. They received a pretty good offer from a group that wanted to push for immediate responsible government, which would have put the Boers into power. But they were pressured to sell for a lower price to Abe Bailey, who would toe the official British line during the war. The reason that is just kind of funny is Sauce had just gotten out of fighting against the Boers, owned a newspaper, and someone was like, I want to buy a paper to put the Boers in power. And Sauce was like, sounds like a good idea. Give me your money. So he didn't care at all.
Yeah.
He didn't care at all about the Boers or not. He just wanted to go fight a war. And then he got convinced to sell for a lower price. But it's just him as a person is one of my favorite characters in history because he just wanted to fight. That's all he wanted was just to have crazy stories. So anyway, regardless of the craziness that happened, Uncle Harry, despite his financial ruin, had still left them enough stuff that they were provided for.
Yeah.
And now, because he was dead, they also owned a gold mine. So Sauce had nothing but time. And what's he going to do with nothing but time? He's going to take one of the first planes that were commercially available and start buying them. So he took a demonstration flight in a biplane. And again, this is 1902, 1903 area, like time, 1904, right around that area. And he loved the biplane and then decided to take a balloon up into the sky. So he ventured in a balloon and decided, and he was a passenger. This is his first balloon flight. And he told the pilot of the balloon, let's just go as high as it can go. And they would go up, and the pilot was like, okay, this high enough? And he was like, nah, I can go higher. And eventually he just took it as high as it could go. And decided, let's just go over the Drakensberg Mountains. And so he tried to fly a hot air balloon over a mountain range, and the gas release cord broke.
Bruh.
And so they were going up into the sky, and ice started forming on the basket, and they could potentially freeze to death. And so Sauce, calm as ever, grabbed a hold of the ropes on the rigging and started climbing outside of the rigging of the basket and collected the cord and climbed back into the basket and then reattached the cord and said, let's go home.
Bruh.
So Victoria Shepherd was an actress in Durban who was touring, and she was playing in a play called The Quaker Girl. And he fell in love with her instantly, started chatting her up, and he was like, you want to go out with me? She was like, sure. So they went out. Little did he know she was supposed to be doing the play that night. And so the touring group called the police to arrest her to break her contract. And so while they were enjoying their dinner, the police broke in.
She got arrested.
They were about to arrest her, and he proposed to her as the police came in on their potentially their first date and paid the police to leave.
Oh my goodness.
Because again, he had nothing but money at this point. He's just super rich. So he proposed to keep her from getting arrested, and they got married. And so he just spent a decade with her, just enjoying life basically around this time.
So for like 10 years, he
Just for 10 years. Yeah, just 10 years. Very normal.
just didn't do nothing. Just spent time with.
Flew planes, took balloons over the mountains. For him, very chill time.
Yeah.
Then in 1913, the white miners had a strike to try to get paid more than the African miners in the area. Because they thought they should be paid more. They were worth more, they thought. And they decided to start killing people to prove it. And Sauce, who was a mine owner in the area, was told he needed to defend the Rand Club, which was a symbolic target for a lot of the anti-capitalist resentments in the area. This passed off good enough for him. And then all of his clients on the stock exchange went bankrupt. And that left him in a lot of trouble, unable to fulfill his financial commitments. And he got, as he said, hammered. This is his quote.
Oh my.
And decided to start looking for alternative employment. And he was removed forcibly from the stock exchange because of these debts that he accrued.
Yeah.
Many years later, when he got more money again, because this is a cycle for him too, if you haven't noticed, he would get money and then lose it on stupid things like get a sovereign when he was 17 and lose it to a barmaid the same day. Many years later, he wound up paying off all his debts to the stock exchange.
Yeah.
Went to Johannesburg, reapplied for membership to the stock exchange. They accepted his membership reapplication, and then he resigned immediately the same day just so he could say he resigned and they didn't get rid of him. His brother Jack, who was a little more financially responsible than he was, realized that he was in a lot of these debts and said he would help him pay it off. But Sauce refused to do any of that. I don't need your charity. And he took a job underground at a mine so that he could learn the practical side of gold digging. Instead of being a director and dealer in shares who owned a mine, he decided to start mining.
Oh boy.
Yeah, tough job. The dramatic change.
How old was he?
So this would have been 1914. So he would have been just under 30.
Okay.
29 years old, and he's fought in multiple wars, owned mines and a newspaper.
Yeah.
Tried to sell the newspaper to the people he fought a war against. Worked in all sorts of fields as a jeweler, a shoemaker, as a caravan driver, one of the first people to shoot a machine gun, had hand-to-hand combat, had malaria, flew a hot air balloon over the mountains, and he was a pilot in biplanes, and this is, again, pre-1914. Had married an actress who was under arrest. The change in lifestyle he took pretty well to, because, you know, he was all about that grind.
Yeah.
He was every one of those like TikTok influencers who are like, I'm up at 6 a.m. out on these streets making that money on that grind, drop shipping. But he was all about that life.
Yeah.
His wife wasn't exactly happy about it because she'd married one of the richest mine owners in South Africa. Yeah. And now he was a miner.
Did she leave him?
No, she stayed with him. She stayed with him. And he was doing quite well. He got promoted to a supervisory role. But you guys, in his history so far, he got hired as a guard at a mine. What did he do? He fell asleep and got arrested. He was a soldier. What did he do? He had to do funeral services for people. So he got promoted to a supervisory role. And about 3 weeks after that, there was a collapse in the mine. And a rockfall killed 18 men. Sauce was the one who survived.
Bruh.
Figures.
But he was nearly crushed to death by the rocks.
Wow.
1 week later, World War I began.
Ooh.
And a very injured Sauce said, "Baby, I gotta go." It's calling to me. So he recovered from his injuries and enlisted as soon as he could. But he didn't enlist with the British. Obviously wasn't with the Americans, wasn't with the French, definitely wasn't going to be with the Germans. He really disliked the Germans. So he decided to join the South African Horse Army, the 1st South African Horse Brigade in 1915, and then went to the East African Campaign. His exploits were exactly what you'd think. He was mentioned in dispatches 3 times, awarded the DSO and the MC, and in 1916, planes from the Royal Naval Air Service, because there wasn't an Air Force yet, were sent to East Africa, and he went, hey, you know who knows how to fly planes around here, boys? I can. And so he started flying planes as an observer doing work in intelligence. And little did he know this was going to come back and be very important in his future when he fought in yet another war, even bigger than this one. And then because of his experiences in Mozambique during the Boer War, he then got picked up by the Portuguese, who made him a liaison officer to the British, working for the Portuguese forces in Mozambique. So while he was in the 1st South African Horse Unit, B Squad, 1st Mounted Brigade, in Pretoria as a 2nd lieutenant, he became a troop commander under General Van Deventer, who was a Boer officer. This is what I mean. He didn't care. He just wanted to be in a fist fight somewhere or a gunfight. He would be up against the formidable German soldier, General von Lettow-Vorbeck, sailing to Mombasa and then riding over on horseback to Nairobi. Lionel's brigade moved south into German East Africa and started harassing the Germans. His first action was near the Pangane River, which was followed on April 3rd by an attack on Lol Kisol Hill near Arusha. So he had a fellow troop with him, who one other man. He managed to convince 3 German officers with 430 troops to surrender to him and his mate. So he and 2 troops tricked them into thinking they were surrounded, and that they were an envoy to essentially offer the Germans a peaceful surrender, and captured 430 troops, 3 German officers, and 3 machine guns by themselves. And then after finding this group, he stole their uniforms and took his full body of forces behind the lines as scouts for the British forces. He got promoted to temporary captain. And I can only imagine that it was temporary because they were like, he's really good at what he does. We don't need to call him a captain. Like, he shouldn't be a captain after this. He had a lot of skirmishes with von Lettow's men and sent back valuable information to the main force. And he really enjoyed the work because he didn't have a superior officer that could tell him what to do while he was behind enemy lines. He built an airstrip during this time for 8 Royal Navy Air Service aircraft. He volunteered in June 7th, 1916 as one of these observers, as I said earlier. And he flew in RNAS number 7 Squadron. He flew multiple different types of planes and was involved in 3 different crash landings. He also had an anti-aircraft and an artillery attack that dropped one of his planes too, and then transferred out in the 21st of February, 1917. East African Air Commander Eric R.C. Nansen described Sauce as a very capable but zealous officer. Gradually, von Lettow retreated into Mozambique, and Sauce was ordered to British Field Intelligence Force, where he was made to form his own special unit called Coforce, with 40 Askaris, which was the African troops that made up the majority of the armies controlled in the African side of World War I, and 1 European officer, and was told, harass von Lettow. So he ended up carrying out a brilliant commando-style raid, complete with him not wearing pants, in which
What?
he crossed the Rovuma River on rafts in complete silence at night whilst it was in full flood and considered uncrossable, and then fell behind the German post and took 25 prisoners. He sent them back under escort, fortified a hill, and dug in to await the approaching German column. Hugely outnumbered, he decided the only solution was to make everyone unload their guns and charge with bayonets before the hill got surrounded. Surprised by such impudence and in hand-to-hand combat, the German force broke apart and ran. As Sauce and his men hurtled down the hill.
Bro.
He continued his offensive reconnaissance until his force got disbanded forcibly. And then he was appointed liaison officer yet again in Mozambique. During this period, a colonel in the area had his unit. It was a rifle infantry unit, and they ran out of ammunition. And the Portuguese refused to help because even though they were technically allies, they didn't want to get too involved.
Yeah.
So Sauce took his Sudanese sergeant and a motor launch full of supplies up the river and relieved them, and then sailed back to his base that night. Unfortunately, the force that he resupplied was attacked the next day and completely wiped out.
Bruh.
But Sauce managed to survive because he left that same night. For his work in East Africa, he received yet another award for valuable services rendered in military operations on the field. He was promoted to captain full-time and then promoted to a major in 1918, and later was awarded a distinguished service order for, again, valuable services rendered with military operations in East Africa this time. He had a lot of awards. We'll go through some of them.
Yeah.
So by September of 1918, Sauce decided that the war in Africa was too easy. He wanted to go see the real war. So he resigned and booked a ship to take him to Britain,
Bruh.
where he would join a group and fight whichever unit he could.
Yeah.
He was probably going to wind up on the North Italian front, but unfortunately for him, ships took a long time back then. And even though he embarked in September, the armistice was declared in November before he reached Europe. So he decided to sail back.
Really? So he went and then just went right back.
Yep. Well, I mean, he had nothing left to do. Africa was wilder than Europe after the war.
Yeah.
So he sailed back and decided to do the thing he hadn't done yet. Start having some kids. So he had a daughter, and then his wife was like, please, we cannot keep doing this. Let's go to England. And so they moved to England after the birth of their first daughter. They had a second daughter in 1921. And Sauce became a stockbroker in England because he wasn't, the commission in England hadn't banned him yet.
Yeah.
Like the African, or the Johannesburg Commission, stock exchange, not a commission, had. But the lure of Africa was still in his head. So in 1924, while their daughter was only 3 years old, he took the position of managing director of the Mozambique Oil Concessions Company and went back to Africa.
Bruh.
They had hopes of opening on preserves of oil and precious minerals that were supposedly all throughout Mozambique, glittering like sand. This venture moved him back to Johannesburg again, and he redeemed his reputation by paying off his debts using his new very high salary,
Yeah.
recommissioning to the stock exchange, and then resigning the same day. You can't fire me, I quit.
Yeah.
Even though they had fired him several years before, almost 10 years before. And he developed a reputation as an absolute lunatic who was very good at his job. His job was to supervise the prospecting on the oil fields, and he had to deal with his main geologist becoming criminally insane, who he managed to apprehend. he had to hunt down a man-eating lion that began terrorizing a camp. And then another time, while wandering, fell into an animal pit that already had a lion in it. On both occasions, he survived scotch-free.
What, did he kill the lion?
Probably. He probably tore that thing apart with his bare hands. You think Sauce of the bayonet charge against the Germans is getting killed by a lion? The company that he was with collapsed under financial debt,
Bruh.
but Sauce stayed on to experiment as a cotton grower. This, however, was not profitable and he lost all his money. So in 1926, he booked a ship back to London. He decided to start farming as a hobby and
Did
breeding.
he leave his family in England? or
Nope, they
did
came back with him.
Okay.
His wife had to have felt pretty good about this because she probably thought that he was finally going to settle down.
Yeah.
Because he got a farm back in England, back home. He started raising racehorses. He bred pigs and cows. And then a little thing happened in 1933, 1934, 1935, and progressively Germany started building a bigger and bigger army. And you see, Sauce had been successful for about 50 years now at taking out Germans. And he would not stand to let the Germans build another army that he couldn't charge bayonet first into. So in his 50s, as a farmer who bred racehorses for a living, he decided to start a volunteer reserve that could provide at a moment's notice a body of able-bodied men ready to serve. And in 1936, he established, with Lord Trenchard, the Royal Air Force. By the outbreak of war, it had 6,646 pilots, 1,625 observers, and 1,946 wireless operators.
Wow.
It was pretty big. This was the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve, I should specify. That was close. So, he got a commission as a pilot officer in the actual Royal Air Force by pretending to be younger than he was. And then second he was in, he started telling everyone, "Oh yeah, I'm old.
Yeah.
I've been around the block. I've flown planes in several other wars." So he was in the Royal Air Force in February of 1939, and when war broke out, he was 64 years old.
Oh, wow.
Wait, my math is wrong. 54 years old.
Okay.
There we go.
Still old.
Still very
Yeah,
old.
that-
Yeah. Sorry, that was a horrible math. He served. Now, this was his fourth war. And he was the Royal Air Force Coastal Command Liaison Officer with the Admiralty. He volunteered for 70 operational flights, which was more than 500 hours flying over the Atlantic. He carried a lucky gold sovereign with him, which I assume he didn't give to a barmaid this time. He flew convoy escorts and ice reconnaissance out of Iceland. He stayed in the gunner cabinet on the round turret, despite the heating failing, while he was on Bear Island, and stayed in there for the whole mission. And when they landed in Reykjavik, it was so cold that he was frozen to the seat, and it took 2 crew members to try to pull him out.
Bruh.
And again, he was in his 50s. He was promoted to a wing commander and took part on attacks on German battleships like Schwarnhorst and Gneisenau over the Court of Brest in April 23rd, 1941. The same year, there was a shipping attack off Norway, and his aircraft got chased by 4 German fighters. And he just made it out. Probably didn't break a sweat.
Yeah.
On another occasion, his aircraft was part of a 4-craft strike on a German U-boat over the Atlantic, and supposedly they sunk it. Couldn't find evidence of that though.
Yeah.
So the majority of his story, most of what I've told you is actually confirmed. The majority of his story, he has a ton of other crazier stuff that, well, not crazier, but he has a lot of other stuff. It's all in a book that he narrated to someone though. And some of it is even more unbelievable than the stuff that definitely happened.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff definitely happened. And I was like, when I first researched this, had a lot of trouble finding sources for it because he's not that famous. But it was confirmed that he was real and his story was real because he received a lot of awards from the RAF and they discussed his history in them. And so I mostly am keeping the stories from there. Some stories, like his mining incident and stuff like that, were actually in newspapers, so you can find it because of mining accident. The sinking of the boat, they claimed it sunk. A lot of pilot crews and Air Force crews claimed they had better success than they actually did. Submarines did the same thing because they wanted to get credited for sinking boats. Yeah. And because there were so many boats on the water at this time, they could just claim, like, you'll notice the battleships that they went after had names. The U-boat they sank was a U-boat they sank. Yeah. So they just fly back after a mission and go, oh yeah, we sank it. Yeah. So whether it actually happened or not, who knows? But he did have a patrol in a Catalina over the Atlantic for 21.5 hours. He also was wounded in the head by anti-aircraft fire from a German battleship, the Lutzow. He survived despite getting wounded in the head by anti-aircraft fire. And then his penultimate trip was in a Halifax. He was hit by flak, the plane was. They had a crash landing. He was in the gunner turret. He was a gunner. He wasn't the pilot. Remember? Ooh. This was he wanted to be an air gunner. Which is not a good position to be in when a plane crash lands. No. And the plane crash lands and they're like, "Oh my gosh. We just squashed that 60-year-old to a pulp back there." And they came out of the wreckage. Sauce. His nickname also during World War II was Evergreen because he didn't get old apparently. Yeah. And they saw him flipping his gold sovereign completely uninjured. What's the problem, guys? So, First Sea Lord Admiral Dudley Pound asked him, "Why do you keep flying? Yeah. Aren't you a little old for this?" And he said, "Without practical experience, I could not offer solutions to problems. It's good for morale to have senior officers sharing watches with the young aircrew." An Air Ministry spokesman described him as a grand chap. It said that for gallantry and devotion to duty in the execution of air operations and setting a magnificent example to all by his untiring energy and courage, he was to receive the DFC at 69 years old, the oldest air crew member of the RAF.
He was 69
when he received that award. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Wow.
He received a lot of awards post career. To be fair. But so he was
how old was he when he actually stopped being?
So his last flights in 1945, and potentially he flew some in 1946 after the war was over, because he received an award from the U.S. in 1946.
From what?
I'll get to it.
Okay.
He would have been 60.
Okay.
In 1945, he was a 60-year-old. 45, yeah, 85 to 45, yeah. Wait, no. He was 70. I was doing my math wrong. Yeah, because he was born in 1875. It's 25. Yeah, he was 70. Sorry, that was right the first time.
Wow.
That math wasn't wrong. He was 69 years old, or 64 when he was joining the RAF in 39, and 69 years old at the end of World War II.
Wow.
Whoa.
We know 70-year-olds who can't get up a flight of stairs. He was walking off plane crashes
Yeah.
and head wounds
That's
at
crazy.
70.
That's ridiculous.
And it's not like he took great care of his body.
Yeah.
He was doing bayonet charges, crashing balloons. Whoa. That's even crazier than I thought because I didn't do arithmetic. He was given awards by the king at Buckingham Palace in 1944. He was mentioned in several dispatches, making it 5 times in 2 world wars. And then the U.S. in 1946, when he was 71 years old, gave him, from the president himself, an American Air Operations Medal in recognition of valuable service.
Okay.
So he might have assisted with some sort of flight program, or it might have been retroactively given for his World War II service. But that's a pretty important award to be given to just a guy.
Yeah.
And who knows with all the stuff he did. When recommended, Marshal of the RAF Sir John Slessor said, "I have never put up a recommendation that I thought so well deserved than for old Sauce in his 70th year. Few, if any, commanders can have had a junior officer with a campaign ribbon won before the commanding officer was born." Sauce's reaction to his award was that he accepted it for the incredible youngsters of coastal command with whom I fly. I have been sufficiently honored simply by being allowed to keep such company. They're the salt of the earth. In addition to all of this, his daughter, Eileen Broadbent, was senior company commander. And his daughter Elizabeth was a section officer in the Women Army Air Force. And his wife was on the headquarters staff of the WVS in London. Oh, wow. So everyone in the family got a little bit involved. He got very involved.
Yeah.
So the war finally drew to an end. The Bulawayo Council, from his first campaign, 51 years after the fact, conferred upon him something called Freedom of the City, which is an honorary position, kind of like Key to the City here, but it referenced giving someone their freedom back in the day when they had slavery. The city guaranteed that you'd be a freeman. So they gave him their honorary award like that, Freedom of the City on Sauce, which was the original batch of people given that were from the ones who fought in the Matabele land. They were honored in 1943. This one happened even in 1945. And so, as an unknown teenager who sailed there with 50 pounds in his pocket, he returned as a hero to receive Freedom of the City. First time being in the city.
Yeah.
51 years earlier. And he had to leave behind his military job to go visit. To receive the award he had from a military action he had taken 51 years prior. Rhodesian units were being repatriated. He wangled a berth of air with a group of airmen. They managed to all travel together. As the ship approached, the captain ran up to the ensign and said, "In your honor and Sauce's honor, they were going to send forth the first time a plane had ever flown over the sea there to honorarily present it to him. They came north in a special train, which arrived at a station full of adoring people. Local dignitaries applauded him, and this was a city he again hadn't visited in more than half a century."
Wow.
Imagine what his kids thought. So he visited Mr. J.G. Payne, who was city councilor and became later the mayor, and decided to live with him for his time there. Several other people had freedom of the city conferred on them, and he had to give the speech of thanks and tell them about entering the smoking ruins of the capital and praising the inhabitants of the modern city for their wonderful development. 12 years later, Sauce, who was still alive, got invited back again and stayed with the same guy, Mayor Payne. And the ceremony for them was to unveil like a memorial garden, and they wanted Sauce to be there for it. So speaking for some of the other veterans of that war as well as himself, he said they'd lived happy and eventful lives, but were no different from the modern youth. I think he was lying. Though this was when the Korean War was starting.
Yeah.
And man, we're just lucky there wasn't a fifth war for sauce.
Yeah.
But he decided at 82 he was a little old for a war this time. So he praised the development as a glorious place where people take you for what you are, not for what you've got. He had a lot of very fun quotes, but you can look them up if you want to read them. He recalled his adventures ballooning, capturing Germans, including the 430 soldiers he captured with him and one other person. Apart from those 2 visits to southern Rhodesia, like nothing else is known about him. We do know he was broke and had to work as a stockbroker again because he had trades done in 1957 and applied at one point for a pioneer's pension, complaining that there was a bank squeeze and poor harvests. So nothing else is known of his brothers or sisters. It appears they all somehow, staying in their rich home in England, died before their brother who fought in every single war he could find and flew planes and balloons. He outlived all of his brothers and sisters and their children.
And their children?
At least we know he never interacted with them again.
Oh.
And in 1960, at the age of 85, not 75, because of math, he died peacefully in his sleep. So, some awards he received. He received a military cross on February 1st, 1917 for valuable services in military operations in the field during World War I. He received this as a lieutenant in the South African Horse Army while attached to the Royal Navy Air Service. He received a Distinguished Service Order in 27th of July, 1918 for distinguished service in connection with military operations in East Africa during World War I, which is awarded to officers for meritorious or distinguished service in combat. He received mentions in dispatches, which was like official recognitions for distinguished service that was published in the London Gazette. He received 3 of those during World War I and 2 of them during World War II.
Oh, wow.
He received a Distinguished Flying Cross in 1944 for gallantry and devotion and duty in the execution of air operations, which was conferred right before his 70th birthday. In recognition of valuable services, he received the American Air Medal. And those are just from World War I and World War II, the awards he received.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Crazy. And to wrap this up, given his peaceful death, I'll go back and just read the Air Ministry News Service's bulletin number 12,797 from February 1st, 1944. So this is from the award he received, and it's available to read for yourself at the Royal Air Force Museum.org.uk. Wing Commander Lionel Cohen, who has been awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for gallantry and devotion to duty in air operations, was born in 1875. Since 1940, he has been Air Liaison Officer to the Royal Navy and has taken a continuous and active part in Coastal Command operations. In order to gain first-hand operational experience, he has voluntarily served as an air gunner and as an observer in many sorties, which have ranged from the Norwegian coast to the north of the North African coast in the south. In all, he has made 45 operational flights, totaling some 500 hours with Coastal Command. These flights have given him many varied and exciting experiences. In 1941, in a shipping strike off Norway, he was in an aircraft which was chased by 3 Me-110s and a Ju-88. He took part also in an attack on the Schwarnhorst and the German name, when they were lying at Brest in the same year. On another occasion, he was in a Coastal Command Sunderland, which attacked a U-boat 4 times in one sortie over the Atlantic. In 1942, during an attack on... And again, they don't confirm that it was sunk, which is why I said him saying it was sunk. Yeah. But everything else in this is why I was saying that one wasn't confirmed, because I feel like they would have mentioned it if it was actually sunk in his commendations and such. In 1942, during attack in the North Sea on the German pocket battleship Lutzow, when the aircraft of Coastal Command were met by enemy fighters in heavy flak, Wing Commander Cohen was injured in the head. I think he was born that way. Other flights in which he has taken part include convoy escorts, ice reconnaissances from an RAF base in Iceland, and anti-submarine sorties off the Spanish and North African coasts. He has also flown on patrols and lay light and other aircraft in the Bay of Biscay. One of his longest operational trips was made in a Catalina over the North Atlantic and lasted 21 hours.
Wow.
Oh. Sorry, one sec. Technical difficulties. This veteran has behind him a military career of outstanding achievement. In 1893, he served as a trooper in Matabeleland, southern Rhodesia, and during the Boer War was attached to the Portuguese Field Intelligence. In February 1917, he was commissioned with the South African Light Horse and employed in the Intelligence Department, East Africa, in charge of the Iringa district. In January 1918, he was appointed British liaison officer to the Portuguese forces as a staff captain. In September of 1918, he relinquished his appointment and rank on embarkation to England. In civil life, he has for many years been a stockbroker in the city of London, having previously followed that profession in South Africa. In February 1939, he became a pilot officer in the RAF-BR, that was the Volunteer Reserves, and was called out for service on the active list in August of that year when he was posted to headquarters of Coastal Command for operational duties. He attained his present rank in 1940. On the 1st of February 1917, he had received, and it just continues with his awards that he's received. So, and then that bulletin ties up with awards list number 744, yada yada. It goes into his awards and such. So yeah, just wanted to read that because it sounds like whoever was writing his very technical military awards service had a couple of breaking points where they were like, this dude was 70. They had like, he was born in 1893. Did I say that twice? Yeah. He fought in the Boer War. And again, fought in the Boer War gets mentioned 2 different times. So yeah, Lionel Cohen Sausage was a crazy lunatic.
Why was he called Sausage?
I haven't actually figured out. It was a nickname from when he was super young.
Oh, okay.
I know Evergreen, what that one was for, but I don't know.
Oh.
It's it, like I said, the stuff from his youth, you can't even find a picture of him when he was little. All the pictures you find are from when he was older, receiving awards and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a crazy story.
Yeah.
Well, if you enjoyed that story, be sure to check out Misfit History. Leave a rating, review, comment who you want to hear about next. If you're listening to this, you know where to find us. Yeah. So just stay tuned for the next episode next week.